In this video, I'm going to show you how we sew the hem of the lined Octave coat. I've scaled the pattern pieces down 50% just so it can show up a little bit easier for you guys. So this is the main. I've just done a plain front without the pockets just to make it real simple. And you sew the shawl collar piece starting at that marking straight on. Press your seam allowances towards the main coat, and then you can also clip into the curved area there. With the lining does not have the hem allowance that the coat does, so you're applying the shawl collar right at the end of the lining, but you don't start your stitching until that T marking, and then you stitch it on completely just like you did the coat. Press your seams and clip around if you need to. So now put your lining to the coat main, right sides together along the shawl collar edge. Clip it, pin it in place. Then we're going to go in and we're going to stitch the collars together, which will essentially make this all one piece. We're going to start at the end of the collar by make sure you fold back that seam allowance that's unsewn there. Start there and go across and all the way around and do the same on the other end. Okay, we've got the lining and the coat sewn together at the shawl collar. You can see where I went in and I clipped that corner stitching section, and then you can also see how I folded in that seam allowance and stitched straight across. So now what you need to do is clip into the curved section around the lapel and the neckline, and then we're going to turn it right side out a little bit and we're going to press our seams. So this is the panel that you'll see from the front. This will be the inside and this is the lining. So you want to press your seam allowance for the panel that you'll see on the outside. Press it towards to the right. And then as you come up to the lapel, where it starts to curve out is called the break point. From the inside, go ahead and make a little clip into that little flare area just to make turning it easier. And so you would have understitched on this side, and then when you get to that break point where it flares out, switch your stitching to, we'll call this the right side, because when this is worn, this will be worn against out like this and you won't see that stitching. When you're understitching, since we've already sewn the lining to the coat, you won't be able to get to the very end, but you should be able to get pretty close. Okay, so I'm gonna start my stitching. This is at the end of the collar piece, and I'm stitching on the left side. If my lining is on the left side, I'm stitching to the left side of the collar. The seam allowance is pressed this way towards the left. That's why I'm stitching down. And I put a pin here for the break point. This is where the lapel starts to flare out. When I get to that pin, I'm going to move the seam allowance to the right now, and then my stitching will also be on the right. So I'm just gonna go under there and flip that seam allowance to the right side. So I've come to the break point on the opposite side, and now I'm just going to do the exact opposite I did at the very beginning. I have switched my seam allowance back to the right, and now I'm going to understitch on that side as far as I can. So here's what the final result looks like. From the right side, you don't see the understitching along the collar until you get to the break point, but that's when that folds against the neckline and you don't want to see it anyway, so you won't see it on this side. So we turn our coat wrong side out again, and now we're going to do the final bagging. So for this step, we're going to take the lining and match it up to the coat hem and pin matching the seam lines all the way across. All right, the lining is sewn to the hem of the coat, right sides together. Started at one end and ended at the other. So now you're going to turn your coat right side out, go through the opening you left in the lining side seam. A good press, get all the pieces where they belong. Okay, so the corners of your hem are now, there you go. You can see how once you get this pressed, it'll be nice and clean, but the lining is longer than the hem, but you're not gonna run the chance of the lining peeking out. And that's it. And there is a little bit of unsewn part in here that you can hand sew if you like. So here is our finished hemmed coat, doll size basically. You can see how we've got our nice clean corners with a little extra length for the lining, and it's not going to peek out, and it's all nice and finished. And all of our edge stitching or understitching is on the correct sides. So there we go.